La 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 la.
Okay. All right, I think we're good.
That's talking.
Right.
I assure you that was language and not complete bollocks.
Hello, and welcome back to anime. Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and envies. This is Warui Deshou. I am the Subtle Doctor, and we are here. We are doing Stream of Thought, our episodic blog series on Listeners, the Spring 2020 anime joint written by Dai Sato, produced chiefly by Mappa. Along with me, as usual, is my chief compadre and the hardest working man in pod business. It is Shadon.
So, Doc, did you enjoy reference to Thing in this episode? Because that's what this episode was 90% by volume. Not to its benefit, unfortunately.
I don't know if it was, but you know, we should probably save this for our kind of discussion portion of the show, because I think I have something I'd like to say regarding this.
I swear, though, right, I agree with you, we will get to it eventually, but I just want to put it out there now. If this episode had gone so far as to have Neil playing an acoustic guitar surrounded by candles and flowers, particularly quoting Man Who Sold the World, I would have turned the episode off and not look back.
Oh, you wouldn't have turned it off. You'd have been like, this is the greatest thing ever. I love it now.
And only on opposite day.
Yeah, no, I have something I kind of want to say that I feel like I will just point back to in future episodes, because...
Is it fuck you, Shadon, you're wrong?
No. No. But I will... I feel like it will apply retroactively to the rest of the episodes we've covered and to the rest of the episodes going forward. So I want to kind of plant my flag in the ground and make my claim about the references and such like later. But of course, what are we talking about, Shadon? We're talking about Listeners Episode 4, Teen Spirit. Is it called Smells Like Teen Spirit or just Teen Spirit?
No, it's just Teen Spirit.
Okay. So, the Teen Spirit episode of Listeners. So, usually, before we... Here's where the fuck you Shadon comes in.
Yeah, I deserve this.
Usually... Usually before we do this, we have some polls to summarize, to check in on the results, but we don't have those this week. Why is that?
Because fuck you, Shadon, that's why. there is no good reason for it. I just got distracted and never got round to putting them up. So
we forgot.
Let's just pretend that I put a poll up like saying, does the crown stay on during sex or something like that? I don't know.
Right.
We'll just pretend.
Did you listen to MBV after you watched this episode?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it was 100% yes, because I sure did.
Did Kevin really spend an entire 4 years inside a giant laundry machine?
The laundry machine. I hope, man, I won't put you on the spot. But I do.
No, do it. Go on. Get me on the spot. I don't mind being on the spot. Hit me.
Did you listen to Loveless after I talked about Loveless last week? I sure hope some people did.
I did not, because I'm an idiot.
Sad.
But I will say, I'm going to get some credentials out of the way, because I've actually done more work than I would usually do, so that means I've actually done some work for once in preparation for this episode. So
you'll be doing the heavy lifting with the musical history, right, this time?
Kind of. So just
I thought so.
Just to give you all an idea, I actually mentioned on our last podcast, folks, that I had seen a documentary on Kurt Cobain, the name of which I couldn't remember at the time. So I watched episode 4 of Listeners, and I had feelings towards it. Not the nice kind either. And I thought to myself, okay, I can't no-arse this, not even half-arse it, no-arse it, that is. I've got to do a little bit more with this one. At least this is how I felt. So I decided to go rewatch that documentary, and it was Montage of Heck, directed by Brett Morgan, released in 2015. This is the one I mentioned that featured interviews and commentary by people such as Kurt Cobain's mother, Chris Novoselic, I think his name is. He's like the main guitarist on Nirvana, has been there since the beginning. And of course, Courtney Love, who I will be bringing up later in this episode. Oh boy.
Sure.
That's going to be fun. So I thought I'd watch that just at least to try and, build my knowledge back up about Nirvana, because yeah, this is the Kurt Cobain episode. There is a Kurt Cobain XP, much as there were the My Bloody Valentine XPs in the previous episode. But the key difference here, and this is something we'll get into later, is that and again, speaking from kind of ignorance about My Bloody Valentine, like, to call Kurt Cobain a complicated man would be a massive understatement. That'd be like saying that the Dead Sea has just got a tiny little bit of salt in it. You can't you can't undersell this enough. Like, he was a complicated man who suffered from many mental health issues and physical health issues, physiological in nature, such as bronchitis, stomach problems. Like, that was a big part of the documentary, made a heavy mention of that. And of course, it sadly results in him taking his own life when he was only in his mid-20s, from my memory. So yeah, whereas My Bloody Valentine, from what you discussed last time, and I, again, speaking from my own fuzzy moth-eaten memory here, like, I don't believe that their personal lives were anywhere near as complicated or as tortured as Kurt Cobain's was. And you'll find that, there are a lot of artists over the years who sadly have lost their lives, or who have suffered tremendously, not because of their creative spirits, but more as a correlation thereof. It seems like there's a non-causal effects of that kind of thing. Like, I mean, I can think of a few off the top of my head, like Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, and of course Audioslave, Chester Bennington from Linkin Park. I mean, say what you will about Linkin Park, but they were a creative force in music around that time. Basically,
Lane Staley from Alice in Chains as well, I believe.
Amy Winehouse.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into my pain is worse than your pain in terms of Nirvana and MBV, because
no, that's not what I'm trying. No.
Yeah, well, Kevin Shields had a breakdown of sorts.
Right,
He came out of the other side of it. He survived, and Kurt Cobain, like you said, along with a litany of other pained individuals, tortured artists, did not, and famously did not. I mean, I think his suicide is probably the most kind of famous incident of that type that has occurred in my lifetime, in terms of a young artist taking their own life. I think just more people have had more to say about this particular one than other ones that I can recall.
Well, you know what's crazy? As part of my research, so I watched Montage of Heck, which I'll come back to in just a moment, to address how I felt about it, also some of the controversy surrounding it from one particular aspect. But it turns out, from having read the Wikipedia article on Cobain, it seems that at least once a week, the Aberdeen Sheriff's Office, or I think the Illinois County Office, wherever it is, they get at least one phone call asking for the case to be reopened. And that's been happening consistently, at least once a week, ever since he died, which is insane. And there's not, of course, a small amount of conspiracy theorizing going on around his death. A lot of which does involve Courtney Love. Yeah. And I'm going to get ahead of myself if I start talking about that. But anyway, okay, so sure. I watched Montage of Heck. I thought it was really good. It wasn't so much about his legacy as a musician, but more as a portrait of a person. It was about him as a human being and all that came with that. There are some very good things that documentary does, in my opinion. For a start, Courtney Love does not appear in the documentary until it reaches the point in the narrative of Kurt's life where she enters his life then. So we get past the point in which Nevermind is released and they meet for the first time in the narrative of the documentary, recounting his entire life. And that's when she appears to start doing interviews. She doesn't, for example, come in and do interviews about what he was like as a child because she obviously didn't know that to the degree that his mother did, who was in the documentary from pretty much the beginning. It's been a well-rated documentary at that. It's available on Amazon Prime Video, at least in the UK, if you're interested. I would recommend giving it a watch. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention, as part of, one should not rely on a single source for their research, some of the caveats that come with this. Right. The first thing is, Dave Grohl is not in the documentary at all, which to me was very odd.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, I mean, we all know Dave Grohl from his most famous musical stint ever, performing for Queens of the Stone Age.
I was going to say being the drummer for Queen.
Yeah.
I was going to... Oh, you beat me to it.
I was holding on to that. But yeah, like, Dave Grohl is not mentioned...
Foo Fighters.
Yeah, of course. He's not mentioned in... Well, he's mentioned in documentary, but rather he doesn't contribute any interview material or the like. And I can find no evidence, at least on Wikipedia, as to why that is, because, funnily enough, on Kurt Cobain's own Wikipedia entry, there are numerous instances of Grohl being interviewed since Kurt's death, where he discusses it and, shows some real, pain, personal pain, and how he understood Kurt, was suffering. So I'm a bit surprised it didn't contribute. It could be any number of reasons. I'm not going to speculate on that. But that's...
maybe he just... didn't want to do another one.
That could be the reason.
2015 is super recent, and that happened. What was that? Is that the 20th anniversary of his passing?
I don't believe so.
When did he die? Was it? Was it 93 then? I thought it was 95, but was it earlier than that?
It was 94, I think.
Oh no! Okay, right in between the two.
Yeah.
So maybe he just was. Because he's talked about it plenty. It's not like he doesn't have a lot to say.
He could have been touring potentially as well. There could be a million and one reasons, so it's not right for me to speculate, but he was absent nonetheless from the documentary. Even though, as I say, Chris Nosoviak, who was, I'm sure I pronounced his name wrong, who was, of course, Nirvana's lead guitarist after Kurt Cobain, did provide commentary. Oh, one small nice touch, by the way. Chris is not meant, every person who gets introduced in the documentary, Montage of Heck, they have a title card, name and relation. And in Chris' case, it's not Chris Nosoviak, lead guitarist for Nirvana. It's Chris Nosoviak, Kurt's friend, which I thought was a really, really nice small touch on the part of the filmmakers. So this is all fresh document interview footage with Courtney Love, Kurt's mother, Chris, also Kurt's father. But yeah, Grohl is not in it. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that there is no unbiased documentary, period. You can't make a documentary about anything. Not even about Green Gift Water.
Wait a minute.
Wet, without there being some bias.
What are you saying?
I know, it's crazy, What
are you saying about history?
History's filtered, There is a truth, of course, and there's as close to truth as we can get to it, but, I mean, and... I would also then need to add in as well that this film, was actually initiated at Courtney Love's prompting when she went to director Brett Morgan to do that. So you can read into that however you wish, but to presume it was entirely on the initiative of someone who wasn't as close to Kurt as she was, controversy surrounding her and all that, that's obviously not the case. And the last and big thing I need to mention here is that on the Wikipedia article for Montage of Heck, there is an entry about a gentleman named Buzz Osborne, who is apparently was a very close friend of Cobain's, and he's the lead singer of the Melvins, and he says the film is basically a load of shit. Now,
I like the Melvins as well. By the way, just as an off thing.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? If you want my perspective on it, I find it difficult to write off the testimony of three individual parties, immediate family member, friend of the lead performer in the band, and then wife. I mean, you can read into however you want about Courtney Love having her own agenda. I mean, there's all sorts of conspiracy about it, which we'll discuss a little bit later on. but at the same time, it'd be rude of me to write off Buzz's own perspective as well. So all I'm going to say is, like, as part of my research, I watched this documentary. I read up on the Wikipedia article about Kurt Cobain himself, where it offered even more details that weren't in the documentary proper, such as, if I just very quickly nip over here, Kurt's first girlfriend, Tracy, is interviewed as part of the documentary, and then, of course, Courtney Love. But Kurt had another girlfriend between them. Between the time that he was dating Tracy and then when he was, of course, married to Courtney Love, whose name was, if I just find it here, where is it? Here we are. Toby Vale, who was a part of a band called Bikini Kill. And you might think yourself, like, she surely can't have been all that important to Kurt's life if no one mentions her. It was her who actually put the phrase teen spirit into his head and offered inspiration for that song to come about along with others. She was a big part of his life. Why she's not in Montage of Heck, couldn't tell you.
Let me just say very quickly that Toby Vale is like a top 5 name for cool lady musician type.
Yeah. And as it turns out, by the way, Teen Spirit actually was a deodorant. It wasn't like something that just... yeah, and she
amazing.
Yeah, she apparently spray painted. One of her friends who was a member of her band spray painted the phrase "Kurt smells like Teen Spirit" on Cobain's apartment. So, well, there you go. Like, there's a lot of history here that the documentary does not address. What I also did was I also actually took the time while at work today to listen to both Nevermind and In Utero, but that's not even all of Nirvana's discography. That's just the two most well-known parts of it.
Right.
So I've done a little bit of work this time around to prepare for this because I felt a very strong sense of disquiet about this episode. And I will get into that in rigorous detail later. But I just thought I'd try and put out there that I think your mileage is going to vary immensely depending on two things. First of which, how much you like Nirvana's music, and secondly, how much you know and care about Kurt Cobain as a person. These things, by the way, can be mutually exclusive. You can give not one iota of a shit about Nirvana's music, but still admire Kurt Cobain as a musician, or even just as a person going through like the struggle that he did. Or conversely, like my relationship with Morrissey, I can really like his music, but I think he's a complete wanker. So, yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, your mileage may vary applies to everything. It's the most, like, you know, pointless statement ever, even though I've said it before on the podcast. But it doubly applies here. So take everything I will say from here on out with the usual pinch of salt, and then like a hefty teaspoonful or more as we go. There's going to be a lot to talk about, but I've spoken long enough.
Well, I think there's a third factor, but I will get to it. I'll get to it later. Not just the, like, in terms of your mileage may vary. Like, there's the Cobain, there's the Nirvana music and its personal meaning to you, and then there's a third factor, but I'll save that bullet for later. So quick summary of episode 4 of Listeners here. We have Echo and Moo arriving at a, like, not dilapidated, not broken down, just entirely, like, sprung from a brochure high school, which is weird, but I found it weird not in a bad or troubling way. Like, I kind of like the surreality of it all, that within what we have seen as a pretty, like, you know, fucked up world has been kind of deeply affected by whatever happened with the Earless in the past. You still have a very picturesque high school.
If I may add two things in here, by the way, two small details.
Sure.
First off, there is The Wall written on the wall outside, right, which is a Pink Floyd reference. So you can keep that one. I mean, I joked on the previous podcast, they're going to shoot a beam of light through a prism and that's going to destroy the earless forever. That can actually still happen now that we've had a Pink Floyd reference made explicitly in the show itself. It's just more likely as a result. I'm holding out. I'm reckoning. But secondly,
ping off the dark side of the moon.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the second thing is the music that plays over this, and this makes me want to go back and actually listen to the music from the previous episodes more closely. It is an instrumental cover of "Come As You Are."
Yeah, they have a couple of those that are really. I think they're good.
I the second time I watched it, I was like, "Where do I recognize this from?" I was just there tapping my head. I was like trying to get it in, get in my right frame of mind, and then it clicks with me. I was like, "Oh yeah, cool."
Former professional wrestler Raven came out to an instrumental cover of "Come As You Are."
Mm-hmm.
Good old Raven. So the school is not just any school. It's, I forget the name of it, but like it is sort of government type school where, we know that Mu and Echo are aware that like all these amazing players come from this school, and it's because like that's what they do, right? They're meant to cultivate those kind of people, and the kids, you can see later on the episode, the kids are very aware that that's happening, and there's a lot of like interesting little subcultures that they walk around through the school.
They had the cheerleaders from these Smells Like Teen Spirit video at one point.
Yeah. Yes, they sound very motivated. The cheerleaders, the skaters, the like some shirtless people meditating,
the gingerbread bakers.
Yeah, right. So that's really fun. And so the reason that they're here, though, is they want to find out about Jimmy Stonefree because, I guess, did they say he came from here? I can't remember if that was.
He's not in the. The place has info on him, as I understand it. He might have been a former student there, but regardless, since he's not in the almanac, like that's the best lead they have on finding him.
Yep, and that's being not in the almanac is man, this episode adds some layers to that, but yeah, so this is their lead, to come and ask the director of the school what information that she has on Jimmy. And of course she has some, but she will not give it to them for free. They have to help her solve this mystery. They have to help her figure out where the teen spirit is coming from. The teen spirit is this purple spray can of
last seen in Silver Flavor in Mad Max Fury Road.
Indeed.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Oh, yes. I need to see that movie, Shadon.
You've got. Oh my god!
No, I haven't. I've seen other Mad Maxes, but not the Fury Road installment.
I am utterly speechless. It's one of the best action movies of the last 10 years.
Yeah. So I've heard. I know.
Carry on.
Well, gosh, where was I? Oh yes, the Teen Spirit, the purple bottle. It is a drug. It gets you a high. It makes you feel. So it's said in the episode at various points that it helps with emotional scars. It helps you feel like a god. It's the kind of thing that rock and roll stars would probably really enjoy sniffing, or people who were in an immense amount of emotional pain.
I personally prefer Pritt Stick myself, but to each their own.
So, like, to sort of provide cover, our heroes ingratiate themselves into the school by posing as transfer students, and immediately everyone is into Mu, and mostly everyone ignores Echo, except for a young lady who he does not know is a young lady, but turns out is a young lady called Nir, who open parentheses, automata, close parentheses.
Oh, fuck me. I hadn't even thought of that. God damn it! I've got blood gushing out my nose in a second from that, just in the pain. But yes, please continue before I have an aneurysm.
And Nir is kind of the character who is based on Kurt Cobain. Nir, of course, being short for Nirvana, Kurt Cobain's band.
Yep. Nir, by the way, is wearing an outfit that I am 99% certain I have seen Kurt Cobain himself wear at some point. My initial thought it was on the video for In Bloom, but it's not. Although both in Bloom and in Montage of Heck, Kurt is shown to be wearing dresses on occasion. That plays actually into part into what he discussed about his own sexuality and how he believed he might even be bisexual. Mind you, sexuality and gender identity are different things, so I should be conflating the two. But regardless, like, the visual design of him is very much like from somewhere or some point in time where Kurt literally wore those clothes, even down to the colours.
Yeah.
The difference is basically just more in terms of A, gender, and B, age.
Yep. But they both look equally tired, because Nir looks very tired throughout the episode. And like I said, the fellas in the class have taken a liking to Moo, and immediately someone's like, "What's your 3 sizes?" And she does not throw a magic 8-ball at his head like she ought to have, but she's just like, "Himitsu, it's a secret." And they all kind of, after class, try to get her to go with them various places. But a young man steps in and says, "Actually, let me take over here. I would like to be the one to show you around and talk to you. My name is Hole.
First name
and
Ass.
I am... Sorry?
First name Ass.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Depending on how you feel about Courtney Love, by the way, that's not even necessarily inaccurate, but anyway. Hole obviously being the band that Courtney Love performed in.
Right. So we have Cobain and Love represented by their band names and gender swapped, which is an interesting choice. And so Hole takes Moo aside, and they end up talking about the teen spirit. And Moo is like, "Hey, you gonna help me figure this shit out?" Hole's like, "Yeah, sure. I'm nothing shady about me at all, but I definitely will help you figure this out, or, as we find out, lead you on a wild goose chase to keep you from figuring it out."
By the way, before we go away from the scene, I want to note 2 things. On the blackboard at one point is the word celebrity, and one of Hole's most famous songs is Celebrity Skin, which I'm fairly certain is a reference to that. Also, and this is going to be something I will bring up later, but I want to note that it exists. There is an Oasis Definitely Maybe poster in one of these shots in the student council room as well. And I'm not talking as in, like, you know, a McDenny's like version of McDonald's here, like where they change the names around. No, that is literally the band's name and also their, you know, song / I don't remember which one definitely is. Fuck it, whatever. But like, put a pin in that, because that's such a small detail. But it feels to me very like it's very revealing. It's like, you know, pulling away the thread at something and it just completely falls apart. Yeah, I don't have nice things to say about the implications of this, but we'll get to that later.
Okay. So let's see. They being Moo and Hole, investigating, trying to figure out the source of the teen spirit. And first they visit this really strange, like, I don't know, it's almost like a sauna that she gets pulled into.
We are the Mathematics Club!
By wait, like, dudes that look like they are, like, I don't know, taking a mud bath? I don't really understand, but they're the math club.
It's just hit me, and I don't know if this is even accurate or not, so I'm just going to put it out there and see if it sticks. Are these 4 meant to represent the Red Hot Chili Peppers? Could be. Don't know.
I don't know.
I'm just.
Why would you say that?
I don't know. It just pops into my head completely unbidden. Okay. So I'm just going to assume it's like some sort of psychic premonition. I don't know.
Are one of them called Fibonacci? I know the basis is Flea, but one of these folks here said he was called Fibonacci after the sequence.
Yes,
that's all
I'm sure that they're a reference to something. I mean, at this
they
point,
must be some math rock.
Yeah, this episode is so caked in references. It's like, you know, it's the marzipan, the cake, except that in my opinion, there's not a huge amount of actual sponge on it. But again, I'm gonna have to restrain myself here.
So, yeah, nothing doing there in terms of leads about the teen spirit. They end up going to the library. This is out of chronological order, but.
Yep.
Just to finish this off, they end up going to the library.
Lithium starts playing, by the way.
Yep, yeah. And Moo talks to the librarian, or who is this guy that she's talking to?
Again, must be a reference because there's like this little pink fairy flying around, and I'm like, I'm like,
I should have looked into this, but I didn't. So.
It's been a while since I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to say it's been a while since I've encountered an episode of an anime that also technically serves as a pub quiz section. Do you recognize all of these musical references?
Right. So like, she gets information out of him. He just kind of starts talking. It's like, well, I don't know about any teen spirit being bought or sold, but you can make it, and if there's a book about it, we have it here. Let me show you. And of course, Moo then starts to kind of figure out, well, it's being made here. And so that is a big lead in the investigation. And we see Hole in the background get pretty annoyed that this guy revealed so much, which is our first hint, I think, that he's truly behind this, which is not a really big mystery. But meanwhile, Echo is being followed by Nir in a very funny scene where he doesn't realize that she is stalking him. Every time he turns around, she manages to get out of his line of sight. And he is just about to clock her when she says, no, I just want to be friends. And they go up to the rooftop, her kind of secret hideaway. She really likes him. She wants to be friends with him. She loves players also. She talks about how, like, lonely she is and pain she is, but then she found out about Jimmy Stonefree, and it kind of changed her life, and she's like, I want to do this. He's so inspiring. This, of course, is, like, she's speaking Echo's language, and he's, like, weeping. Just like, yes, you get me. I understand you. We can do this. Like, we can be like Jimmy. And they have a nice moment. And... well, it turns out that after Echo, shows Nir his amp after said nice moment, we get a kind of twist here that I wasn't exactly expecting. Nir is a player. She has a jack on the left side of her head above her temple, and she grabs Echo's amp and plugs it in, and creates a sort of squid-ish robot.
This was the best moment. This was the best moment of the episode for me, but I'll talk about it later.
Okay, causes some havoc at school, saying, I thought your amp would make me feel better. It's over pretty quickly. She crashes into the building, and they kind of take the amp from her.
For context, if I may just ask though, Doc, like, because I've read this in I actually also read Anime News Network's review of this episode, which I will be referencing again later. Okay. But in that review, I can't remember the name of the review. I don't have it to hand. I really should just have to.
Nick Dupree is his name.
Was it Nick Dupree? I could have sworn it was someone else.
Yeah, Nicholas Dupree.
Okay, so Nick mentions that the reason that Nir did this was to kill herself.
Interesting. I didn't... What? Because what does she say? She says something about taking the head off.
Well, she tries to smash the head of the robot, and because she's on the outside, herself into the school wall.
Okay. So that wasn't immediately clear to me on first watch, but, like, I'm not saying that that's incorrect at all. What do you think?
I'm going to say yes with an asterisk.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that the asterisk is something I'll have to talk about later. I'm being very coy because I do have very, very strong opinions on this whole portrayal of, not Kurt Cobain. But
coy isn't the word I would use. You're snorting like a bull waiting to be let out of the pen.
All right, I was trying to give myself a little more credit than I actually deserve. So I will simply say yes, but with terms and conditions applied. Please see the small print for details.
Okay. I mean, given who we're talking about, and who this character is based on, I'm not gonna dig my heels and be like, no way. And again, I just didn't. It was not immediately apparent to me when I watched it, but goodness. So after this, I can't remember if anything else happens before they kind of cut to Nier at the pool. But basically,
Mu finds an empty can of teen spirit. And that's what caused it to click into place for her.
Aha. Okay. Very good. So Nier, we cut to her sitting on the diving board at the pool. A purple radiating pool because
I am stunned there was no baby float swimming in that. I am stunned.
There was no what?
No baby swimming in it.
Oh, because of that. That would have been a lot.
Yeah, it already is quite a lot in various respects in this episode. But yeah, I was like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh no, don't do it. And they didn't. So that's nice.
Well, so it turns out Nier is the one who's making the teen spirit. And she is cooling off the super hot batch of it in the pool. And no one will bother her because there's, we've already seen Keep Out spray painted and on the fence of the pool and some caution tape, and we saw it earlier, and this is what Moo has
smashing
deduced.
Pumpkins, by the way.
That's right, the pumpkins were being smashed outside of the key.
Yeah,
that's good. I enjoyed that. That's a fun one. So Moo and Echo show up, and say we've discovered you're doing this. And then Hole appears well, guess what? Now you have to die because we can't have you knowing our secret. And they so I forgot to mention earlier that did Moo fight Hole with did Moo fight Nier with Hole's amp?
No.
When Nier was using Echoes? Okay. He offered it to her, but that didn't end up happening. So this time, they do fight. There is a robot fight. Echo is very reticent to allow his amp to be used against his friend, Nier, but Moo, very sensibly, is like, look, she's coming after us, we have to defend ourselves, takes the amp, gets to fighting.
She literally asked us to entertain her,
I know.
Flat out quoting the lyrics.
I know, singing the song, which they have all done so far. Well, the Valentines did. I don't know the New Balton lyrics, if there are lyrics.
We'll go with yes on songs.
That. But the MBV song titles and lyrics definitely got quoted last episode, and they do it again here, which is fun. And so while and I thought it was a cool touch that the robot that was spawned from the combination of Hole's amp and Nier's jack was different.
Yes.
While being squid-like, still different than the bot spawned from Echo's amp and Nier's jack, which makes me wonder about different combinations and how that will play out. But
yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, that was cool. So, the main thing that the show focuses on here, though, is the talk between Echo and Hole. Echo is held at knife point by Hull. And was this some sort of reference? Was there like a famous incident where Courtney Love pulled the knife on Kurt Cobain?
Nope. At least
Did
not.
You say yep or no?
No, that was a no. According to
okay.
Like nothing of that saw in the documentary, but again, that documentary is clearly not a complete account of everything. So I'm not going to assume that it's impossible. But that being said, it also wasn't mentioned on the Wikipedia article. However, there is something about the Courtney Love-Kurt Cobain relationship that is in the Wikipedia article and also in Montage of Heck that is accurate in this episode, which I will mention now. It's the point in which Hole gives Teen Spirit, the drug,
right,
to Nir. Now, keep that in the back of your mind.
For sure. I mean, that's a big part of this episode. Hole is clearly... Well, we think initially Hole is controlling Nir, and we think that's the only kind of side to it. Hole gives her the drug, and she's able to pilot the cool robot. And Hole tells Echo, look, she's not my friend, fuck you, she's my ticket out of here. I'm going to... She's so awesome, I'm going to sell her off and not have to join the army because, since I am, like, an amp maker, I am going to have to be, like, conscripted after school is over. That's the fate of all of us here, and we're just gonna, like, get hurt and die. And I don't want to do that. I like to live a better life, so I'm going to sell out this person here, so screw you for getting in my way. And Echo starts to fall, but grabs hold of Hull's pants and pulls them down, which is causes him to drop the knife. And Echo's like, you can't do that, Nir's my friend. And this sort of snaps Nir out of the sort of aggressive trance that she's in, fighting Moo. And she catches Echo as he's falling, lets Hole fall. Hole, of course, is arrested is not the right word, but he's taken in. He's brought to justice. Also, who the hell knows, because we don't really see, but he's apprehended.
He's played time out.
He's apprehended, taken away for his crimes. Nir, though, tells them, just like, look, Hole and I were both using each other, and because we were both using each other, we both thought there was a connection there, but there really wasn't. And among other things that I'm sure we'll talk about, she tells them, like, what are you to each other? Maybe figure that out, and remember not to it's easy for those who wield power to kind of get lost in it, and remember that every player loses their mind,
which is, I would argue, I just want to get this out here now, this line really pissed me off, because even beyond something that I will discuss in a bit with regards to the baggage that comes with basically having this XP of a famous musician in here, it is factually untrue in the actual show itself, because we've already seen the Valentines, and apart from their interpersonal issues, they're fine.
Well, of course. I mean, she's not God. She's just saying her point of view that it will happen to everyone eventually, she believes.
We'll discuss that later, but I feel this line is banking on something that is not earned in the show proper. It's where the show's lore and its importation of actual real-world knowledge and history collide pretty hard with each other, and the show loses overall, but we'll get to that.
We can get to it now, because that's pretty much it, right?
Well, we have Patreon questions.
Oh, first. Yeah, no, you're right, but I get for the summary. But it turns out, actually, there's a little bit more, because since they solved the mystery, they're given the file by the school admin, which is just a single page of basically entirely redacted text, which is totally useless except for an accompanying photo of Jimmy with Denka, who is clearly Prince.
Yeah.
And basically, she could have told them this from the beginning, but, just like, look, just find this guy, this person, rather. Not sure if I don't want to misgender Denka. Find this person, and then, maybe you can locate Jimmy. So they're off to find Anime Prince, and that's the episode.
Hope they brought an umbrella in case it starts to purple rain.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. To just take a flying leap into the waters of Lake Minnetonka, etc., etc.
It's a reference. I mean, we'd only be doing what the show's doing, to be honest, by making these jokes. So to heck with it. Who cares? All right, so we do have Patreon questions firstly, which we'll get to.
Okay.
Although I have a feeling that these are not going to be easy to answer because they all kind of, in my opinion, go towards the same core problem I have with this episode. But nonetheless, I will read them all out now and then we'll go from there. So we have 2 from Kate Rose and we have 1 from GoGo Atomic Robot. I will read them in order as they came in. The first of which comes from Kate and says, "What did you think of the portrayal, not betrayal, different thing, of drugs and psychosis in this episode? What was the point of the episode in your opinion? And what do you think the creators were trying to say or show?" I'm going to get the next question from Gogo Sight Rome and then Kate's as well, because I feel like these all, again, kind of have a similar theme sim, and we're going to have a lot to talk about, so we may as well get them in now so that way we can get them all covered. Gogo Sight Rome asks, "Is there a tasteful way to reference a troubled musician, or is it better to avoid the subjects altogether?" And finally, Kate Rose says, "Is it a cop-out to use so many famous troubled musicians in famed songs, or do you think there is an underlying reason / thought process?" Right. Okay, here we go. Here we fucking go.
Well, there's one... Wasn't there a question, the very first question you read?
About the portrayal of drugs and psychosis?
Yeah, that seems like a distinct one. And also, what's the point of the episode?
And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Okay. I'll tell you why, because it's so inextricably tied to what happened to Kurt Cobain. I don't think you can talk about it without discussing him, which ties into the rest of the questions.
All right, go for it then.
Right. Okay. I'm going to have a very quick drink before I do this, because there's going to be a lot to talk about. Deep breath. All right, so I want to get one thing off my chest right here, right now. I want to put all my cards on the table, because to me, this topic of portraying Kurt Cobain in this XP kind of way, it could in theory be prime material for a clickbait ranty video that you find on YouTube. I can see some prick like The Quartering doing some shit about this, screaming that they changed Kurt's gender or something like that, blah, 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 blah. And that's not what I'm going to do for a variety of reasons, one of which is I don't want to be anywhere on the level of that complete waste of oxygen, but also because I think that there's a more fundamental issue I have with this portrayal here. So, to get my cards on the table, I like Nirvana. They were probably one of the first bands that I started listening to around my teenage years. This was after Kurt's death, of course. To the point where I started defining my own musical taste, like where I had an idea of what kind of music I wanted to listen to. Now, that has kind of changed and broadened over time. If, for example, if you asked, say, 16-year-old me if I would ever listen to like any sort of like Wild Curie, for example, I'd be like, no, that ain't ever fucking happening. Not while I have a hole in my ass.
Can I ask you a question? That I feel like I should have either asked you to do this or done this myself at the top of the show, but like, it just occurred to me, like you said last episode, we're really fucking old, and you started listening to this as a teenager, and the band has not been a going concern for over 20 years, so like, there could well be plenty of people that just have no idea who Nirvana is, what kind of music they played, and what their significance was to rock music and American culture. Do you want to take a swing at that?
I'll give it a go. So, basically, Kurt Cobain was described on multiple occasions as the mouthpiece of a generation, and Nirvana were credited either in part or in whole with the creation of the grunge subgenre of music. Nevermind was one of the most successful albums of the decade by a country mile. Smells Like Teen Spirit is arguably seen as a song that represents that particular generation, Generation X, or one of them anyway. Numerous musicians have expressed their fondness for for what Kurt Cobain did, including Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins, who was noted in the Wikipedia article I read. I have to stress that again, that Montage of Heck, the documentary, it's not about the musical legacy. There's certainly mention of it, don't get me wrong, but it was more a look at Kurt Cobain as a person. So I'm not as well equipped to talk about it from that perspective. But
well, I'll just say then really quickly that grunge was such a big deal with 90s youth because it was reacting to a lot of glam rock and hair metal that had come before. Mm-hmm. That is just so stylish. Excuse me. Whoa. Don't know what happened there. Stylistically different. Musically, but then also lyrically, it was, I don't know, just a lot more earthy and grounded, and it's sort of mirroring the musical style and the fashion sense too. I mean, you went from the bigger hair and the tighter clothes and very more glamorous looks to big oversized clothes, big flannel shirts and jeans with ripped holes at the knees, very quintessential 90s.
I mean, part of the reason it's called
looks
grunge,
this kind of came from the grunge scene.
Yeah, part of the reason it's called grunge because everything looks so dirty. The Smells Like Teen Spirit video, apart from pioneering the Bounty Dog yellow piss filter technology, yes, there's a reference for it. You know I'm right as well.
That's so true.
Yeah, that is a dirty looking video, and that also feels true of the other ones as well. In fact, In Bloom made explicit reference to this by juxtaposing nice clean cut Kurt Cobain dressed like the Monkees versus Kurt Cobain's gonna trash this set while wearing a dress because fuck you. So, yeah, it passed me by anyway, by the time I was old enough to actually start appreciating Nirvana. By that point, Cobain was sadly dead. So
they were so big because, I'm sorry to cut. I just want to, just really quickly, we'll just say, part of the reason Nirvana in particular were so big among, the grunge sort of scene, which included groups like the Pumpkins you mentioned, and Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam, was because Nirvana got a lot of play on MTV.
Oh, yes.
And that's a huge reason that they were so beloved, I think, is because of sort of the cultural prominence. I mean, of television in particular, but MTV, music videos and shows talking about musicians and stuff that was a big freaking deal to 90s kids. People just sat down and watched music video. I mean, there wasn't internet. Things weren't on demand.
MTV had music on it. Yeah, it was an alien time, wasn't it, when MTV played music? Strange as that is. But if I may just actually interject and put something out there that is going to be relevant to answering a question later. You are entirely correct about the massive media attention around Nirvana. Kurt Cobain fucking hated it. He hated it with a fiery passion. He wanted nothing to do with doing interviews or even really getting close and interacting with fans. I think if you had told him what, for example, we now know as a parasocial relationship is, he'd probably be revolted by it. And that was clear. Sorry, go on.
Can I ask you a question about the documentary?
Yes.
Because I haven't actually delved into a Nirvana doc before, but I've wondered for a long time if the tension in his life between reviling fame and yet continuing to pursue being an artist when he was a very famous one. Why did he not just quit and go into hiding? Or why did he continue making music if it would seemingly only bring him more into contact with the thing he hated so much?
I can only speculate on that, but I can offer two thoughts on it immediately. The first of which is, according to the documentary, he actually did go into hiding. Like, he took 6 months off after Nevermind came out and became such a huge hit. And I think that was also the time in which he met Courtney Love as well. Now, could be wrong on that, but I do. The 6 month period was definitely a thing. And something that was noted in the documentary, particularly by Nosevic, was Kurt did not have like a lot of resilience to criticism, but he was also a perfectionist. And you know what? I think it's not unreasonable to see that there would be people who have that inner contradiction of being very, having a paper thin mental defense or even emotional defense to criticism, but at the same time wanting to do really good work. And make no mistake, he did, in my opinion. But it's clear that he suffered from that. His journals in particular were all about that, and I think he even actually phoned one journalist to complain about him. And honestly, watch the documentary, but reserve your own opinion, as I say. It's very well put together, and rather than me trying to retell details from it inaccurately as I am wont to do, you'd be better looking at that. But I want to make special note of that hatred of media attention, because that will become important later for what will arguably be one of my biggest criticisms of this episode, and I think listeners' approach in general to bringing real-world musicians in, even if they are allegorical or just, twice or thrice removed. But back to my original point I wanted to make, just to get my credentials out there. I like Nirvana. I don't frequently listen to them. Today was the first time I listened to Nevermind and In Utero in full in a very long time. And I didn't even listen to their full discography, in all this case. Nor have I even listened to, say, their time when they were known as Fecal Matter. So, there's that. As far as my opinion of Kurt Cobain as a person, I have a great deal of empathy for him, for all the mental trouble that he was going through, all the personal anguish. And I think it's a shame that regardless of what I ultimately think of his musical talent or anyone else thinks, that he died that early. That to me is a tragedy, whatever you may think of his music. But I still think that because I did go into forming my musical taste at that age, when I was 16, 17, partly through Nirvana along with some other things that were playing on MTV much in the same way as you said. They were still repeating Smells Like Teen Spirit, Come As You Are, and the rare occasion I got to see the Heart-Shaped Box video, which, if you didn't know, is incredibly explicit not in a profane way, but in a very, God, I don't really want to describe it, talking about it. But anyway, point being, I'm putting that out there so you understand that I will be coming at this with a little bit of a bias. As much as I want to say that I don't want to be one of those reactionaries who's well, he turned into a girl, that made him a kid. I think that there are certain ways in which listeners has taken Kurt Cobain as we know him and brought him into this show that I actually think are in very poor taste. But there's a much also more fundamental issue I have with the way listeners is handling this, that I think speaks volumes to the fact that, for one, I actually think this show needed to have a doubly long runtime. I know that sounds like a crazy explanation, but I think that, for reasons I'll explain in a little while, if we are to have these bands being brought in wholesale, they need to have more time devoted to the individual characters. Because to echo what was said on that Anime News Network review, part of which I disagreed with for the fundamental reason I'll get to later, but one of which I definitely cannot disagree with, this is truncated. Nir's, revealed to us and the time we spend with them is so thin. It's paper thin as presented in the episode. And I think that a second episode to help flesh that out would have helped immensely, but they also need to do some other things different in order to fix that. Right, so I've got that preamble out of the way. I'm going to get firstly to talking about the more fundamental issue before I get into the questions of taste. And I'm going to just come out and say it. I think that listeners is kind of cheating on getting the importance and the emotional connection of the characters across by substituting in its own relationships for those of what we know of the actual bands. Kurt, for example, sorry, not Kurt, Nir saying, for example, all players, lose their minds in the end. If you know nothing about Nirvana, all you know from in the show proper is that is factually untrue. because of what we've seen with the Billings. Sorry, with the Valentines, I mean to say. But if you know about Nirvana, I'm willing to wager, even if you know a little bit about what happened with Kurt Cobain, even just the fact that he killed himself, I'm willing to wager that you probably unconsciously substituted your knowledge for that into the show proper as meaning. Now, is that entirely unfair and not allowed ever? Like, you should never make these references? No, I'm not saying you shouldn't. But Nir exists in this weird kind of uncanny valley where there is nowhere near enough of what's unique and new to listeners as far as she is presented. But there's so much obvious Kurt Cobain like in there, such as the way that she dresses, the outright quotation of lyrics, the relationship with Courtney Whole Love, that it means that this show kind of exists in this weird schism place where it just drives me mad thinking about it, that it's not its own thing, but it doesn't do anywhere near enough justice to Kurt Cobain as a person to actually make me like it. I don't know if you're following me here, Doc. I mean, this is going to be tricky to explain, but this is also why I found, in hindsight, I had a problem with the Valentines, because we know My Bloody Valentine is a famous band, but what did they actually do in the show proper? They're famous players because they're in a book? We didn't even see them fight the A-list at any point, apart from, obviously, when they meet the New Boughton sisters, but I'm talking historically. The show, to me, feels like it's substituting...
Do we need to know that?
Yes, I'd say so, because I think the show is substituting, taking its own time and building up its character's own import inside its own diegetic world, and just cheating by importing, like, what we know of the bands proper from the real world as a source of import, as a source of, like, you know, weight.
I mean, it's just like world building and character building with any story. I mean, all you sort of need to know, really, truly, is like, you don't have to know about all that other stuff. It enhances it, but like, what is their relationship to the main characters? Like, what have they been like on screen? What traits have they shown? What have they done? What are they like? We don't really have to know like what they've done in history. I think that they're in the book is important, and I think the fact that there was another player Nir, who is not in the book, is again a piece of evidence to like towards what we were saying last time, that like the show may be kind of making a commentary about engagement with art and artists based on materials like that. But no, I don't think it's I don't see the criticism. I mean, there's a 20-minute or 22-minute sort of format, and
that's why I say need a second episode.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't understand what's lacking, I guess, is what I get from Nir's point of view. I am hopeful that Nir will come back. I think all the characters we meet will return. If for no other reason than to be in a final battle at the end.
Of course, that's going to happen. They're going to have a fest at the end. That's how it's going to be.
Yeah.
That's going to be.
But I mean...
Well, let me clarify by pointing to something in the episode proper. So Nir mentions that her parents are dead. But we don't even know what they look like. It's just mentioned, and that's it. And it all feels very told rather than shown here, you know. And the thing is, I watched montage of Heck. Both of Cobain's parents are still alive. So I was thinking to myself as I read that line, is that a dead to me line? Is like, I'm conflating the actual real person here with the fictional character that is based on them, because that's kind of unavoidable when you make it this explicit. But because of that, it feels to me like the show was just taking shortcuts and not actually doing adequate character work in its own right, of its own kind, and instead relying on you knowing about the person in question and what happens to them, even though it is different enough that it doesn't gel. But if it's different enough, then there's not enough meat on the bone for me to care. Like, my parents said, okay, fair enough, but I need more than that. Else, I'm importing Kurt Cobain's life in, and he actually had a much more complicated relationship with his parents, like, including the fact that his mother was interviewed as part of Montage of Heck, and she and him were still relatively close even later in life, to the point where when he got the master of Nevermind, she was one of the first people who listened to it. She actually listened to it and offered him the warning that he was not ready for the fame that was to follow. She recognized what a hit he had in his hands. So it doesn't match up with what's in the show with Nir's parents, but all we get in that case is an offhand line. I'm like, what am I meant to take from this? Like, it's not Kurt Cobain, but then what is it? Because it's just nowhere near enough. I can't separate these things in my head.
Well, yeah, I think you might be too close to the sun on it. Like, I think we would do well to talk to someone who just has watched the episode and is not acquainted with Nirvana or anything like that at all, and see if, like, you know, see if they felt like there was some kind of lack or whatever, because I don't know. I mean, I think that you could point to a million shows where in an episode where you introduce a character, details about their life are revealed or told, and you don't have time to explore every single one.
No, but
it's not a big deal.
But the difference is, though, Doc, is that if you say, for example, take in, I don't know, let me think of a one-off character. Okay, I'll come back to the one-off idea later, but the thing is, this is a show that is making explicit reference to real people who it is drawing inspiration from. Many other shows that I've watched where as you rightly point out, I don't get the full picture, I wouldn't have a problem with, because there's no alternate source that, as you say, is conflating with that.
Well, what about Fate? I mean, do you have a problem when Fate does this?
Do you mean as in, like, you know...
oh, they're not acting like King Arthur, or, oh, look, Hercules was totally different. Like, Hercules' mom was cool, you know, like, well, like, this is my, like, sort of question is, like, when is it, I mean, historical fiction is a genre, and there's a lot of it, like, and I think we should look at this show like that, like it's using these historical figures as jumping off points, as foundations, as frameworks to tell stories in and develop kind of original stories and original characters. But, like, when is it okay? I mean, you know, we have no problem with, like, you know, it would be absurd, I think, to, or you would probably be like, well, that's a totally different example. If I was like, well, what about in this one anime where they show Jesus and he's nothing like Jesus' depiction?
I would be okay with that, because
that'd
be funny. But
like, what's the difference, right? I mean, is it a difference of time? Well, then how long do we need to wait until? How long does Kurt Cobain need to be dead before we can do characters based on Kurt Cobain? If it's a difference of time, is it just because of the manner of death? Well, you know. Jesus was wrongfully killed. I don't know. Like, there's, you could take other historical figures.
Sorry,
what's that?
That was kind of.
That's right. Yeah, ultimately,
sorry. Well,
one in the end.
You are right in saying that it's not a simple black and white thing. But I mean, you said Fate, so let's take Saber, because you mentioned Hercules, but Hercules doesn't have a character in
Isn't
Fate.
the first Berserker Hercules?
It depends on what chronology you're going with it. And by God, we're getting to Fate talk now. Fuck.
First Berserker in Fate Stay Night.
Fate Stay Night was indeed Hercules, but he had no dialogue. He was just a berserker.
No, he was dumb. So it's nothing like the real Hercules. Fuck that show.
Well, they had 12 labors as his extra lives. So that's something at least.
Didn't look like Kevin Sorbo. Cancelled the show.
No, that's actually an improvement. I have no love for anti-vaxxers. Fuck them. But if you want to use Fate, then obviously the person we should probably talk about is Saber, King Arthur. Now, the thing is, Fate has a number of things over listeners just in terms of structure. But the first of which being is that Saber is a recurring character throughout many different series. And indeed different routes even, to the point where you learn different things.
But not at first.
No.
There was a time when people would have watched episode 4 of Fate, or read the 4th chapter of Fate.
Yes.
Before it was complete.
Yes.
Like we are now with listeners, right?
Yes. But the other thing I'd mention is I do think time plays a factor, but the thing is, time in itself is not simply in the be-all and end-all of it. Like, Cobain's life is fairly well documented. King Arthur's mythologized to a certain degree.
But there are ones that we could point to in Fate where we have issues, like Jack the Ripper, right?
Man, don't even. Yeah, that's a,
they do Jack the Ripper as a little as a tiny bonkers little girl.
Yeah, kill Lisa. Yeah,
it's like, I don't have an objection to basing characters on Jack the Ripper, like, per se, like, it sort of across the board. But we could look at that one and be like, well, that one is a little disquieting, and why is that? And is the Kurt Cobain portrayal as near here committing some of the same sins? Like, I personally don't think so. I kind of enjoyed the character, and the character to me, because I haven't watched the documentary, to be fair, so I'm not as, like, acquainted with Cobain's sort of personal life, despite knowing kind of the broad strokes. I don't know, I enjoyed the character. Like, I didn't have huge problems with her.
The thing that you're touching on here is the stuff I haven't actually discussed yet, which is where I feel it crosses the line about certain things in terms of taste. The fundamental issue that I was saying, though, was just to reiterate that, again, I think that it's relying on your knowledge of, like, the real person in order to instill a sense, like, that this is important and meaningful, when the show really should be working to do that itself. Because, again, like, for me personally, Nir's own backstory as presenting the show, like, the listener's spin on it of, oh, my parents dead and I have no friends, where, like, we don't even see anyone else even interact in the same space as Nir, which is, I'm like, what's going on? It doesn't even necessarily need to be that people don't like her, but we just don't see it. And I'm like, this is all so abridged, so truncated, as that review said.
It is, yeah. Well, look, yeah. I will grant that it is done quickly, but that, to me, that feels less like a shortcut of you can substitute your knowledge for Kurt Cobain, and more like a shortcut of I don't know, kind of a normal sort of anime shortcut where you're told stuff about, a character's life, and then you just sort of take it as given and you move on, and you kind of have to keep a pin in it as, like, background info, whereas you might not see examples of it. And you can ding the show in terms of storytelling for that, and I think that will be justified. For sure. I get where you're coming from. I guess I'm just, it's one of those things I'm so used to at this point that it sort of passes right through me. That, all right, we're told this detail about her loneliness, and and the fact that she doesn't really interact with anyone, I think, supports that. It could be the absence of interaction that you could take as supporting evidence, and she only seems to interact with Hole, apart from Echo, who she takes to her secret place.
I would agree if I actually, like, recall seeing her, like, in the same physical space with people. Like, imagine, like, a scene of her walking down the school corridor where other people are. They don't even need to say anything to her. I'm not saying that she has to be right that people, like, don't like her or anything. Like, that's part of what makes sometimes for better drama than the actual truth, is that people's perceptions can be off. But yeah, like, I did find this a bit problematic in terms of, like, I felt like the show was cheating, and as much as I said that about the Valentines, I do still think that what works in that episode where it doesn't really work here is that the Valentines served a very specific purpose towards Echo and Mew as the veterans. And granted, a certain amount of that veterancy was, again, implied or inferred from knowing who My Bloody Valentine are, in my opinion. But it still functioned well in terms of the story and advancing the characters. For me, anyway. But here, I don't know really what they were trying to accomplish with Nir. Like, what's the lesson for Echo and Mew specifically? The most we get out of it is from what Hull reveals about the players. By the way, this really
I have an answer to this.
This really confused the fuck out of me about like what Hall's plan was. Like, was Hall actually a player himself or an amp maker? I would have.
Yeah, so that was I'm fuzzy on that also. I mean, I think he just made the amp.
And in that, but I thought the amp was something like that was handed down from the student council previously. From
No, you're right. I guess what I mean is I thought he was just a sort of an analog for Echo, like the partner to a player and not a player himself, not someone with a jack. But we don't really know. I mean, it's definitely a thread that is loose.
Yeah, but like if that's the case, then going all in on this whole as Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain like relationship, and again, I've still even got the things I found distasteful here. Simply to make the point that players go onto a front line and they die, and I don't want that, and I'm somehow got this kind of inexplicable plan to get out of it. I'm like, that's it? You're going to spend a reference to one of the most well-known and beloved musicians in the 90s to make a frankly lame world-building plot point that doesn't even seem to register with Mu in particular. Like, Mu has nothing to say at the end of this. That's it? You're cashing in this chip for that?
Well, so I think you might be making 2 points. The first, the taste point, which we've touched on.
Oh no, I've not even got to
that
stuff.
Well, yet. I feel like what you're saying now to me feels like it's conflating the taste issue and then the what was the reveal, like what was the upshot of this episode. And to me, the upshot was meant to be like it kind of mostly came at the end of the episode in their conversation with Nir, and it was mostly like, I think you're meant to look at Mu and Echo, and in the same way that you compare them to this other functioning veteran couple, there's a comparison you can draw between them and the Valentines to this dysfunctional couple of players, Nir and Hull, and see like, well, you know, things might not be it might not be just a matter of, you know, ganbare, guts, and hard work. Like, things could go awry, things could go badly. There's a lot of ways it could happen. And Nir, denotes those. Like, there's a danger to inherent in sort of being someone who wields a lot of power. And there is a danger in that for players in particular with their partners, because like if those two, Echo and Mu are not clear about what their relationship is and they don't have a connection and don't put that first, then it's Nir's contention that they'll actually do what she and Hull did and kind of subconsciously start to put the power first, and they won't have this real connection, and they will be just using each other. And that is bad and can turn out to be quite bad. And so those sort of lessons and those kind of comparisons, I feel like were the main thing the show was trying to do. I do think it was overall like a little wheel spinny in terms of like, it felt like a detour, because not a ton of advancement in the overall plot, but like I still thought like character wise it was a decent enough episode. That line about the players losing their mind, I think that probably is one of the explicit instances where that line might not really carry as much weight if you don't know about Nirvana and Cobain.
Yep.
And you're just kind of watching the episode. Like, I mean, it still makes sense. It's within the context of the show as a text and nothing outside of it, because we see that the Nir character is troubled and has mental health issues and is has drug problems. And, may have even, depending on what you think about the first scene with the robot, may have even be suicidal. So I think it does make sense, but like, it's much more haunting if you know about if the reference, if you understand the referent that the show is pointing to.
Well, I think
so. That's what I think the upshot of the episode is. But like, and I think that's fine. I think you did probably need to have a group of players that, like, sort of the Valentines were what you could aspire to, but you need some players, a pair of players that are also like, here's what you want to avoid. And like I think Axl that makes
Rose.
sense.
Why Axl Rose? Come on, we gotta keep dunking on that bastard. I'm telling you.
well, maybe they wanted to just make references to musicians they liked. You know what I mean?
Don't even give him the credit of even being in the show.
No, just don't make a bad musician.
Well, just to go back to what you said about like the idea of like Echo and Mew like falling into the trap that Hull and Near fell into. If that's the case, I agree with the sentiment, but I think the episode needed to definitely actually give some hints that might happen to the pair of them, because they don't even spend like a majority of this episode together.
I think that's the point. That is it, because she asked them, like, what are you to each other? And they don't know.
But they don't ever, like, really comment on it to each other or anything. The fact that they are
he's
separated...
crushed. He's crushed that she's not his girlfriend.
That was a joke.
It's a good joke.
The only other bit of conflict was when, like, Echo was like, no, Mew, don't go attacking my friend. But you yourself said that she had the sensible, right idea. And the thing is, I say that still can be a source of conflict. We could have had a scene afterwards where Echo was like, you shouldn't have done that.
Well, look at it in not just the context of this episode, but of the show as a whole. Like, we've seen scenes of her sort of wanting to be pursued a bit more by Echo, wanting to be desired a bit, but not be. And now we kind of get the inverse of that here, where she's like, nah, he's not my boyfriend. And then like, what are you? Are you his partner, his lover? And she's like, Like, so I think throughout these 4 episodes, we have kind of seen that their relationship, that they kind of haven't really defined what they are to each other. So I think it's a point that has been sort of is a not just like look at one episode and see, it's like on the strength of the 4 episodes.
I certainly felt that more with the first 2. I will agree with you there, but I do think that there needed to be time like spent in the aftermath of the events of this episode where they actually discussed what happened and the words they were given. I mean, if this is meant to be about reverence for like legendary players, of which Nur, I would argue, is one in the sense that, again, we are importing wholesale the knowledge that, it is Kurt Cobain, really, then I would have liked the characters to have spent time talking amongst themselves about that, rather than just, oh, did you know that she was actually a girl? And then the end of one joke like, I was misgendering all the time. Yeah, whatever.
I was confused when at first I thought she was a lady, and she was, but then he kept calling Near Coon, and I was like, wait a minute, was it me? Have I been in the wrong the whole time? No, it's just Echo.
No. By the way, side theory on the whole boyfriend line, I actually read that as Mew saying that not to rub it into Echo's face. Not that I thought that anyway, but more as a kind of way of endearing herself to the crowd so she could start like pumping them from information.
Well, I don't think she was being that tactical. I think she was just, she said like, oh, I'm super excited to go to school. Hell yeah, school, social life. Yes, I am Geeky Girl 101.
That was a very short semester. Okay, so let me now... I know I'm talking a lot here, but I've got verbal diarrhea going on at the moment. I apologise. But, all right, let's get to the taste thing. Now, again, I don't want to be the person who, like, gets all outright reactionary, like, it's Jesus. Like, no, fuck that. I think that there's something more to be looked at with this, though. So I actually want to open with a bit of a bait and switch question here for you, Doc, just to put you in the frame of mind.
Okay.
Do you think it's a problem that Jimmy Somfrey is white?
I don't.
Okay, that's fine. Because, I mean, Hendrix was obviously black, and he was black at a time when Jim Crow segregation was still going on. Granted, the laws were rescinded while he was still alive, but obviously, you know, like taking something out of law and then actually putting it, you know, into effects and, you know, being equitable. Well, that still hasn't happened. Sorry. It really hasn't. No. So I will leave further discussion of that actual question until the point we get to meet Jimmy firsthand. Because bear in mind, you are also villainizing, potentially, again, a very famous person. And I'm talking again about the issue of importation of real-world knowledge here, rather than letting him stand as his own person. But anyway, why am I saying that? Because if you want to hear why I agree with, or why I don't mind, or what I disagree with in terms of the changes by bringing Kurt Cobain over into the form that she appears in this episode, I'll say. First off, changing to a girl, not fussed. Not fussed in the slightest. There are some things I did find a bit questionable, though. Like, I think that firstly, making Kurt a child, as Nir, I don't know if you could potentially read that as an indictment on how the creators viewed his behavior. Because, like, as much as I don't want to say it, like, you know, the time in which, you know, Kurt was struggling with drugs, and then particularly also, like, after the point in which his daughter Frances was born. Small side note, by the way, Montage of Heck, Frances was a actual co-producer on the film as well. So more familiar involvement there in terms of, like, oversight and such. But I think that making the child, like, I think that and then conflating that with, like, the behavior we saw of him as an adult, I actually don't like that, really, to be quite honest. I think that infantilizes, like, the complex behaviors of a very, very, like, troubled man. Am I saying that children, like, can't have complex, like, issues? No, not at all. But I don't think de-aging him in this manner was the smart move here, to be quite honest, for that reason. And then, the next thing I want to point out, Teen Spirit, by implication, this episode was made elsewhere. It wasn't Nir's creation. Is that not a bit iffy? It seems a bit off to me, that you're going to take away, like, one of the crowning achievements of his musical career, whether or not he was actually even his best song, and I was certainly the most popular.
Would you like me to answer, or do you still have more?
I have more. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have more.
Go for it. You start asking questions, and I'm like, should I jump in? Should I not jump in? I don't know.
Yeah. But also, making Teen Spirit a drug which is given to him by Hull, aka Courtney Love, who herself was a noted heroin user, and potentially, I say potentially because this has never been explicitly confirmed, and was indeed the part of, like, rumours in the press spread by British tabloid pariah and general piece of shit Piers Morgan, no less. Shouts to you, Piers, if you're listening. Cunt.
Middle fingers to you, Piers, if you're listening.
Yeah, I mean, God, he's been an odious wanker even in more modern times, and it turns out he was, like, twisting, you know, the knife into the fucking Cobains as well. The only musical instrument Piers would ever use would be the triangle, and he somehow ended up still fucking it up. But anyway, piss-taking of Piers Morgan aside, as fun as that is it not a bit questionable that this episode leans into actual conspiracy theories that Courtney Love was actually involved in Kurt's death, or was manipulating him in some way, particularly through the use of drugs? Because Kurt's history with drugs, according to Montage of Heck, it went all the way back to when he was much younger, when he started taking pot. And then he actually transitioned to heroin on his own. It wasn't, like, well before he met Courtney Love. He kicked it, then he got back on it. There's a lot of overlap here, or a lot of things that, like, again, jar with Kurt Cobain as a person, that they are choices that have been made by the creators. I'm not saying that they literally had to import him wholesale, you know, or do the Futurama thing of having him just be a head in a jar so he could offer his commentary in, you know, like, this specific scenario. But there's a lot that I just think to myself, like, that feels a bit in poor taste if it's meant to be reverent of the actual man himself. Especially, I should add, given how abridged this episode is in terms of dealing with her as a person. Nir, that is. This is why, again, I think a second episode would have benefited here, because then it wouldn't feel like it's just such a... How do I put it? a Wikipedia stub entry. I've said my piece, by the way.
Okay. I was just waiting for the checker flag. So the argument I'm hearing is it seems a bit uncharitable, because it sounds like what you're saying is whenever the show does something similar to the real life person, oh, look at this, it's just too similar, too referencey, and then whenever it's different, you're like, it's not similar enough. What are they doing taking these untasteful liberties?
Well, I wouldn't mind if the unsimilar things were in a positive way, but to be honest, like, again, the stuff I've mentioned
it's
is not...
It's a character! It doesn't... I mean, like, it is just a fictional character, right? I mean, it's, not... It's a fictional character very deeply based off a person who lived in real life, down to how they dress. Oh, yes, again, but you don't have those similar problems with other characters of historical fiction. Many of such characters that were troubled or died in horrible ways or were shitty. I don't know. Like, it just feels like that this is the one, because it is something that you are intimately familiar with and means a lot to you, which is great and which I respect. But no, I mean, I think that that this character, you pointed out a lot of differences to the life of Cobain, and there are others that you pointed out before and that are in the episode. And I think that shows me that this is a character that is based on that character and not meant to be an autobiography of Kurt Cobain played out in anime. And I mean, to me, that's fine. I think, if you want to know about Cobain, you can go read about Cobain. But like, Nier is Nier, clearly based on Cobain, and clearly the show is like, Nirvana's awesome. And I won't say it's not tricky to do this kind of thing, because because this is something that happened in our lifetime and a lot of people are close to. And the bit about the drug and Hole giving Nier the drug, like, just right in the face to pump her up to fight in the robot, to do what she wanted. I can definitely see how that feels bad to people. And I'm not going to argue.
That's the main one in particular for me, because that's leaning on real world events that I'm not going to take. Sorry, go on.
But Nier didn't die, and Nier cut ties with Hole, and so it did not end up the same way. I've got a feeling, I have a hope that when Nier returns,
I know
we will see. We will that more. There will be more to be said from her. Like, we'll maybe see more growth from her somehow. That it won't. That her final word to them will not be the last word. With her, like, I think she will realize the world is bigger than what she thinks it is. That there are more different kinds of people, and there can be different outcomes. I mean, like you said, she's a child, and so her saying things like every player goes insane or loses their mind, like, this is what she thinks.
But what is that based on, though? What other players has she known that have lost their minds?
I don't know, but she's been controlled by Hole.
That to me, like, in fact, you yourself actually said Courtney Love and then corrected yourself by saying, which to me feels like proof of the problem. It's, again, relying on importation of real world knowledge rather than being its own thing. But anyway.
Wait a minute, you're just, like, it feels like you're making different points here. Like,
no, it's something I'd mentioned before. I'd already explained that, but the Courtney Love thing in particular, like, I'm not going to take her off the hook. I mean, if you want my opinion, and it is merely my opinion based on my secondhand knowledge, like, I don't think she was good for him. But that's from the outsider's perspective. That does not make her a murderer. It does not make her culpable. Indeed, if she was culpable, one would assume that there would have been at least some court effort. I don't know. But I think that leading into this as heavily as they do, because otherwise,
I'll tell you.
Otherwise, being named Whole to begin with will not register with you in the slightest. It banks on you knowing what Whole refers to, i.e., her, and then consequently, all that conspiracy stuff. I'm like, really? Can you not? I don't think
Whole relies on the Courtney Love story. I mean, it mirrors it. They named her after. What I'm saying is it doesn't rely on it. I'm not saying it's not a reference to it, and it's not based on her. But if you knew nothing, I don't think you'd be like, God, this whole character, I don't really get him, or what he's about, or what he was trying to do. Like, it was all perfectly well explained in the show.
But we barely saw them interact prior to that point. This is the core problem. Like, it's banking on you knowing about the real world people and their relationships in place of filling that in itself. You know, actually devoting time to seeing them interact. Like, the first time I think that we see those two together, from my memory, is the point in which Hull's like, oh yeah, you know, I'm gonna get her Hopsmont teen spirit. I'm like, we've never seen listeners' version of these characters interact together in the same space prior to now. We're being told.
We see a flashback. Yeah, we just see that flashback, but that's it.
It's not enough. This is why I'm saying we need a second episode so they can become more their own things, have more of their own identity within the show, be the show's own thing, rather than relying so much. Else, why have Whole in there in the first place? Why name them Whole to begin with? If you'd called them anything else, then I would have been better with that, because then it would have been less explicit. But you could still like, is this meant to be Courtney Love kind of thing? But I could see like how that's a relationship rather than just feeling like cheap.
Well, but it's it's referencing the relationship dynamic, which I think is interesting. And I don't know, like, if it had been named something else, like, it would not have been as interesting to me.
Could have been its own thing, though. Like, that's the thing. Like, it's referencing relationship dynamic because there is none that the show gives us in its own right. At least not to me.
I'm sorry. Wait, you hang on. You cut out for just a second. Can you repeat your point?
What I'm trying to say is, like, it's referencing the relationship dynamic between Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love because the show offers us so very little that it creates itself. All we have is, as you say, is that flashback, and then they finally appear on screen together at the pool when the plan was. I'm like, that's not enough.
Well, I think So I think the buy-in it does require of you is just that all these people are important enough to reference. But I think that's
not just tell us, though.
But I think that's all. I mean, I don't know. This is another case that, like, again, maybe I'm just used to this form of storytelling, but, like, I thought their relationship, the way it was pointed out on screen, while being rushed, I still understood what it was about. I still, totally got, like, and the reason they weren't together and interacting and all that was because I feel like it was more or less a secret thing. Like, he's using her, they're making drugs, they are going to cause some shit, he's going to sell her, like, they have their little plans. Of course they're not going to be seen together all the time. But
that's the thing, though. Like, it might be a secret to the population of that school, but it doesn't need to be a secret to us as the audience. We have the privilege.
But then it would have. So it was a mystery that Courtney. That I keep calling them Courtney and Kurt, as you do. It was a mystery from the beginning that Hull was behind the whole thing. So if it showed them together, you risk, like, revealing the secret. Like, it was a bit of misdirection in terms of, like, you know, who's doing the teen spirit? I don't know. Like, oh, it turns out Hull was the man behind the curtain the whole time.
But if you have even the most threadbare knowledge of Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love's relationship, the moment that Hull, and of course know that Courtney Love was a member of the band Hull, as soon as that is mentioned, the mystery evaporates. This again,
yeah, but again, that's you. You have that. You have that. Not everyone is going to have that.
But if you don't have that, then why are you watching the show that is about these characters to begin with when they're so explicit to the point that they will actually reference the fonts used on the album and even play covers of the songs.
Wait a minute. So you're saying that you have to know all the references to watch a show with references? Because I've watched tons of shows that are filled with references just to watch them, and that's how I got interested in the reference. And then I went and looked at them. I feel like this is made like you've said earlier, like, you know, it's made for people who demographically are younger than the people that would have been listening to this music in their youth. I think it could be like seen as a, like, hey, if you're, you know, we're explicitly referencing a lot of these people, and maybe you should check them out if you don't know who they are.
I would have to ask someone who hasn't actually seen, or who knows. Good luck not knowing anything about Nirvana, because by God, there's been covers of their songs even like in the past couple of years. I think someone, oh God, there's some wretched pop right. cover of "Smells Like Teen Spirit," and it reminded me of the cover of Alice Cooper's "Poison," because whoever covered that, whichever pop singer covered that, they deserve to be tried in a court, because. That song, Poison, like, is all bombastic operatic energy, and they completely sucks it out and turned into this crappy, like, love song thing. I was like, why? And they did the same with Smells Like Teen Spirit, like, where it was just completely devoid of the energy that made it work. So I don't know. I'd have to ask someone.
Well, I think it's important to remember this is made for a Japanese audience, and they are referencing a lot of foreign music. So I think the likelihood of Japanese young men not knowing about Nirvana, New Boughton, and My Bloody Valentine and Oasis is much higher than a British person or even an American person who, know what I mean, even the same age.
This is fair. I admit, like, you know, this is why I put all those biases out there before, like, just to offer the thought that, yeah, I'm coming from a very particular perspective here. I can't answer the question of how effective this show would be at getting you interested in where these references come from. I will give them credit for actually putting the covers of Lithium and Come As You Are in that case, and I think they do Smells Like Teen Spirit over the fight.
They do, yes, they do.
Yeah, so I'll credit them for that, because that I think is probably the most key thing one would have to do in trying to get people interested. Like, this sounds cool. I wonder what it sounds like with lyrics. That's something.
It is neat. I
do like that.
I also think it would be, as much as I think this is the weakest episode of the show in particular, talking about the show as a whole, and it's a show that I feel in some ways so far has been a little bit like, hasn't kind of been everything I'd want it to be. I think it would be a mistake to be like, this show is just a billboard. Like, all this show is a catalog of references. I think it is telling a story. It does have its own world, its own mythology, its own characters, and, you know, it is doing the historical fiction thing of taking these well-known people and relationships and situations and happenings and using them to inform the characters and everything, but also, like, it's not doing it in such a way where, like, the reference is like this isomorphous, super tight one-to-one autobiography. So I think it would be a mistake to just be like, this is the reference show and that's it.
We literally beat Kurt Cobain. Or even if we did something like, say, the film Yesterday, which was where the Beatles disappear from the world and only one gel remembers the music. That's one way you can do it, mind you. And you are right, as you say, about it being like for a Japanese audience specifically. But I do think my criticism of it relying on the import still stands, though, because if you go in knowing nothing about, say, Nirvana, you won't have a clue why this kid is really all that important or interesting, or even why some of the things that Nir says, again, such as that line about players losing their mind, how that, in the show's lore, is, as I say, factually untrue. Because the Valentines are doing just fine.
So, like,
right.
Sorry, go on. Can characters not utter untruths?
Yes, but we are, like, first off, I think it's reasonable to assume that we are only seeing, as you and I have discussed, these characters as one-shots until they more than likely reappear at the end. And that's why, again, I keep coming back to the point, we needed 2 episodes. We needed more meat on the bone. Because all I keep thinking is, you are relying on me and my knowledge of Nirvana to fill in for what you are not providing in of yourself. That's the problem. That, to me, is the criticism I want to make of it. That's the fundamental issue I have, above and beyond like the taste issues. Like I say, I like Nirvana, I like Kurt Cobain, but I don't love them so much that I will go screaming about it. But I do concede that there are problems about it. But for me, as far as storytelling goes, if you can't or won't write the reasons why in your own diegetic universe these characters are important, instead have to rely on references to actual people that either A, people won't know and therefore it's lost them, or B, will know and then think, so, well, why aren't you doing like your own work on this? Like, it feels lazy. That's lazy storytelling, in my opinion. I mean, to go by comparison... Sorry, go on.
No, I thought we covered this point, is that like the importance of the character. There's plenty of reason beyond Nir being Kurt Cobain why Nir and Hole are in the story, at least to me. And I outlined those earlier. And whether you think that those are good reasons or I'm mistaken or whatever, like I can make a case for why they're here. I don't think that there's, if you don't know these bands, you'd be like, oh, I have no idea why these people are in the story. Like, they play their part, and I think it's, to me at least, was pretty clear, like the purpose they were serving in the little detour to the school.
Okay, fair enough. What I suppose that I'll come back to is I'll just mention the questions that Gogo Type Robot and Kate Rose asked, which were, is there a tasteful way to reference a troubled musician, or is it better to avoid the subject altogether? And is it a cop-out to use so many famous troubled musicians and famous songs, or do you think there's an underlying reason for the process? Now, we probably broadly covered the answers to these, but I want to go back to something about, in fact, two things firstly. You were talking about the world having its own lore and mythos even. Do you recall how I mentioned before there was the Oasis Definitely Maybe poster?
I do.
That to me feels like a fuck up, because we've already had the bar Oasis. So are Oasis an actual legitimate band who put out Definitely Maybe in this universe? This is where it feels like they've overstepped the mark a little bit. Now, it's a small thing, I grant you, but I just think to myself like that...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just think they might be getting a bit too excited, a bit too proud of the fact that they know things like these bands and want something. And I feel like that was a mistake.
That could just be for us, and a very non-diegetic like wink, like, oh, look at this character in Gunbuster. She has a Space Battleship Yamato poster. What are you saying, that this anime exists in this world? No, it's just a little wink, wink to the audience. Like, look at this cool thing. You know, the funny thing is, I agree with you there. And there's another example of where I agree with you also in this very episode with the Pink Floyd reference or the Smashing Pumpkins bit. But we've already had Bar Oasis, which is its own thing in this universe. So no repeats.
No repeats to the point where you cross the line where you're actually referencing real things when you've already referenced them for fiction. Like, like I jokes in the poll that we did. Like, I wanted to go see Liam and Noel fight in the bar. Did they actually do that at Bar Oasis, listeners? Please answer me, Dai Sato. I want to know. I'd love to see that. I think that'd be quite funny. Although it would just be a repeat of their celebrity deathmatch fight where they were just too drunk to kill each other. So, that's another MTV reference. Okay, so I want to just say something finally about... Because I actually do have a nice thing I want to say to round this off with. The thing that we discussed earlier a bit about the robots. But here's the thing. We
haven't talked about the drugs.
I don't think there's much really to say, because I don't think it can be divorced from the Courtney Love issue. On its own, like... Well, first off, like, I don't even understand what the purpose of, like... I almost said Purple Haze then, but that's a different thing entirely.
That's a Jimi Hendrix reference, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I think this episode would have been better if it had been named Purple Haze, but never mind, that doesn't matter. It would have been the right colour as well, funnily enough. But, like, okay, so Nir takes it, and that allows him to start, her to start singing. I felt like what this purpose of this drug was, or how it helped people actually fight, was a little lost on me. I think in Nir's case, I understand it as a confidence booster, and, well, that makes sense if you, again, know about why Kurt Cobain took drugs. But there's a way of, like, trying to quell his anxieties. But in terms
This
of
feels
the wider...
like this feels like
Sorry.
a true nitpick.
It is a nitpick, but
Do you
but
need to like every time a character takes drugs in a show, be like, all right, let me bust out in universe this medical book and be like, now we're going to talk to you about the side effects and the effect of these drugs.
This is
like,
your brain.
No,
on Teen
just
Spirit.
watch. All you have to do is look how it plays out, and that is what the effects are. Like,
I didn't really notice what the effects were. That's the problem. In this case, anyway.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what could have solved this problem other than a long translator's note about here are the effects.
Hey, try this new
of,
drug.
Teen
It's called
Spirit.
Try this new drug. It's called Keikaku. So I don't really have much to say about the drugs thing in this because it's impossible to divorce it from Kurt Cobain as a person and his history and Courtney Love's history, which we've discussed at length, so I'll not repeat myself there.
Yeah.
But what I will say is this. Kurt Cobain, according to both the documentary and...
well, can I say about the drugs? Just really quickly. No, it's okay. I mean... I think it being a fake drug, like, sort of gets the show off the hook for, like, being super duper, like, responsible and thorough. Like, I mean, I don't... so the question in particular, I want to get the specifics of the question. What was the point? I'm trying to find the question. Is it a cop-out? Where's the question? Is it a reference musician? Where's the listener question about the drugs?
What did you think of the portrayal of drugs?
Oh, what did you think of the portrayal? Oh, okay. I mean, I thought it was very shorthand, but, you know, it did what it needed to do. Like, again, the show, like, I think, you know, it has a runtime that's short, and, you know, I think...
Oh, that's very disappointing for a drug, to be honest.
I think we may be expecting a lot when we don't hold other episodes that use, I don't know, have characters taking shots or whatever before fights or something like that. We could be holding this episode to a higher standard, and because it references things that we know about. And we're like, oh, we gotta, for real, talk about the drugs, like, because this was a really big deal in this person's life or whatever, when... just watching it kind of play out, like, it sort of tells you what the deal is. And I think, like, I don't know, so I don't really know, like, it's hard for me to say, like, well, the show didn't do a good enough job talking about, like, what the made-up drug does, because it's a made-up drug. So I don't know, man.
Yeah, I again was stressed that I can't divorce my answer from my knowledge of Kurt Cobain, but I think that's intentional on the part of the creators, else I have nothing really to say about what the purpose of Teen Spirit is in this episode beyond reference and inference. So, okay. The point I was going to make was that Kurt Cobain, according to Montage of Heck and also the Wikipedia, one of the things he hated about the relationship between the media and himself, and also his fans and himself, was people misinterpreting and misusing his lyrics as, like, inspiration. Basically putting him to be, like, as I was mentioned, like, the mouthpiece of a generation. He wanted none of that. So, Gogotai Romot says, is there a tasteful way to reference a troubled musician, or is it better to avoid the subjects altogether? Now, with the massive, massive caveat that if this particular person wants no involvement in your depiction of them whatsoever, or is indeed deceased, as Kurt Cobain is, I think that the only way one can tastefully depict a troubled musician is to at least create your thing and then get their approval after the fact. Because they may very well not want to be shown at all in any negative light.
Oh yeah, doing it for living people is like a totally different kettle of fish, right?
Yeah. But I think that if you got the approval, thumbs up or thumbs down, thumbs up rather, of that person in question, yeah. And indeed, even in Montage of Heck, as I mentioned before, like, I forgot his name now, but you remember what I mentioned before, like Kurt Cobain's friend from the Melvins, like, even he disapproved of the portrayal of Cobain in a documentary about him. So never mind what I'm bitching about this particular episode. There are people who have actually, who know him firsthand, who've complained about like his depiction in that, and that obviously goes against like his family's views, because otherwise, why would they make the documentary if they didn't like it? But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is this: with what Cobain said about how he hated about people misrepresenting and utilizing his lyrics as like mouthpieces for their own feelings and whatnot. I am of the opinion, and this is strictly my opinion, and it has no authority or like, whatever in it, period, to be quite honest. I don't think he would have liked seeing himself portrayed this way at all.
Oh, God, no. Oh, hell no.
And that's why, in my opinion, I don't think this is a tasteful show, because I don't think he would have been happy with it.
He wouldn't have liked the documentary about his life. He would not want his name written in any text anywhere.
I actually mildly disagree with that, because the thing about the documentary is a lot of it also relies on his journals being basically quoted verbatim. But I'd also think that had he been alive and that documentary made, it would have been very different. It's a very much a what-if thing. But that's, I think, the litmus test that you would go for if you want to make a tasteful reference to a troubled person, is to get their approval. Not their involvement, though, because that inevitably brings its own kind of bias. Otherwise, they may as well do an autobiography. I mean, exactly. I certainly wouldn't, for example, get Morrissey involved in a documentary by himself. Can you imagine what fucking that would come out like? Jesus Christ. People be blowing enough smoke up his ass to actually contribute to global warming. Fuck. So that's my answer to that question there.
Okay, my answer would be like that. I think clearly there are distasteful ways to do it. I think that there is a wide berth of what's quote unquote tasteful when you're doing historical fiction.
It varies from person to person as well, like which person you're actually looking at. One standard applied to one may not even apply to another.
Yeah, and I mean, time is a factor and all these different things, like, and certainly, like, what it matters, like, kind of what you're doing, like, how much is this based on the character, and, like, how are they acting? Like, if Nier had just been, I don't know, constantly trying to jump off a building or something like that, and it would have been too much. There's definitely some ways
I definitely agree with that, yeah.
There's some ways they could have truly screwed it up, but I think like they didn't dive into those kind of really distasteful extremes, and so I think that they are swimming in waters here that for me are perfectly okay to do historical fiction, and but also I need to stress that Shadon's point of view and his ire and frustration at certain things happening in the episode, particularly when it comes to Whole and Teen Spirit, like I can't, like I that's not really for me to like assail like those feelings. Like if you're troubled by that portrayal, I think I totally get it. You know what I mean? Whereas in some instances, depending on the figure you're portraying, like for instance the gender swap of King Arthur for Saber,
I actually think that's
if you're troubled by that, I would be like, I mean, come on, don't be unreasonable. Like, but I think this is
they actually do something with that. That's the reason I like it in that instance. So yeah, you can put me on board for that as proof that I'm not completely against revisionism of anyone, really. And similarly, like, well, I don't feel it mattered in this episode. I didn't mind that Nier was a girl.
Truly. And, like, I mean, even if they did nothing with, quote-unquote, King Arthur as a lady, I mean, who cares? But,
I can think of some people who care very much, the waifu lovers that they are.
I mean, who cares? Like... Yeah, I just want to express that I think that the material is sensitive enough and everything that it is entirely reasonable to feel a little bit disquieted by some of the stuff. Whereas I don't, other people may, and I think, again, I don't think that is invalid or unreasonable or anything like that.
And just to also mirror what Doc said there, like, yeah, I would personally say I've not come at this all that strongly. I mean, you've heard me before, folks like raging against things like Franks and Kabukicho Sherlock, and that's about completely fictional people. This is about an actual person. So people could, as much as, Cobain's friend mentioned from the Melvins, like how he thought, well, that movie's bollocks. People could have a much more extreme reaction than I have. And you know what? I similarly wouldn't disagree with you either. It matters differently to people depending on the connection that you have. With that particular person. And conversely, as a result, like Doc having not the same reaction as me, that doesn't invalidate his thoughts in the slightest. If anything, and again, I'm glad that we have art that does provoke a difference of reaction in people. It's complicated. And Doc did indeed say, like, for example, about how, well, what about X and Y from history? And the honest answer I would give is that, one, maybe I should go back and reevaluate how I feel about those, but two, it's going to vary from character to character or person to person. I mean, as much as we joke about fate, there could very well be some King Arthur fans out there who are very much into Arthurian legend. I can imagine it's especially frustrating for history teachers if you try to Google image search for King Arthur.
Oh, come on. I have heard people say that they can't search for Nero anymore. But
so funny.
Yeah.
That makes me chuckle.
That's a mild frustration.
I find it hilarious. I can just imagine that. Like, all right, I'm going to search for Emperor Nero. Oh my god! Like, don't look. But anyway, like, in all seriousness, like, there are people who are probably, very deep history enthusiasts, and they would be like, "What the fuck is this shit? This is atrocious. This is disrespectful." And who am I to argue? I mean, I might find it funny when this stuff happens, but I'm not in that zone. And in much the same ways, like, I would say, hey, I've got my grievances with this depiction of, like, this Kurt Cobain expert. I can't, therefore, in good conscience, simply dismiss people who feel less strongly or more strongly because of that. So,
I mean, at least...
It's complicated.
It is.
Damn it.
I mean, at least they didn't sort of make light of... the things that were troubling Cobain. You know what I mean? And Nier wasn't like a figure of fun. Nier was not an object of ridicule for being troubled.
I think making Nier a kid has certain sketchy points to it in terms of, again, like, diminishing or infantilizing Kurt's behavior as an adult, especially if you've seen him play on stage, by the way.
Right. I mean, and that's where I differ in terms of, I think this is just Nier standing on her own 2 feet as an original, as a character, an original character based on clearly someone's life. But like, but yeah, I guess my point is, like, there are definitely characters I could see and would be like, if I heard, like, well, this anime is going to, like, have Martin Luther King Jr. I'd be like, well, uh-oh. There's, the red flags a go-go. And I could, like, there are some that could be here where you think, oh man, like, they could really, fuck up and how they, like, portray mental illness or have other people
like Sherlock Holmes, for example.
But I don't think that they stumble in any of those, like, really those big ways that are like a slap in the face to, like, whole kind of groups of people. I think the issues are these very specific ones to, like, what is your relationship with Kurt Cobain, and then, like, do you find the portrayal of Kurt Cobain's, this character based on Kurt Cobain, an issue? I'm with you on that, and you're absolutely right in that. As much as I have my issues with this, like, it is small potatoes relative to what you could, in theory, have with actual much more important historical figures. I grant you, though, there could be some fun had with that. Like, can you imagine if Mahatma Gandhi was portrayed like he is often in Civilization games? That would be something. Like, on top of that, my ire, I should stress, is always mostly reserved, or mainly reserved, for stuff like we've seen in Frank's or in Kabukicho Sherlock, where it's specifically either perpetuating ideas that are extremely harmful to people in general, or willfully malicious towards particularly minorities. And
And this is neither of those things. I certainly don't think Cobain would have liked this. But, well, he is just one person ultimately. So... Right, I actually have.
Are you ready
one
to rate
nice...
the episode? Oh,
I know.
you have a thing.
I have a nice thing to say because this is something that we brought up, and it was my favorite part of the episode. Let's talk about the fact that players, when they use amps, get different results depending on the amp they use. I thought this was really fucking cool, and this is ironically in my catalogue of problems I have with the show, a counterexample against them of where it gets done right, because. Without any actual, like, massive exposition dump, when Nier tries Echo's amp, it still has the head, but it's an octopus. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I like that. And then, similarly, when Nier uses Hole's amp, octopus again, different design. And you can, in theory, like, we don't obviously see it, but I like that we didn't because it allows you to speculate what would Muse... equipment have looked like had she used Hole's amp.
It allowed me to speculate what JRPG would this be a boss in. I went with Kingdom Hearts.
This would actually be a legitimately good JRPG mechanic, I must stress. That would be so cool if you could collect like amps and they had different effects and you had to swap. It basically worked like Persona, let's be honest. But I still think that'd be cool. But there's actually a meaning behind this I liked, which is that different artists do different things through amps, like, and it feels like it's reinforcing like the way music works. Like, it's not the same output for like with different people using the same equipment. Like, you know, it's not the same output when different people use the same equipment. Like, you get different things, you get different results, even amongst different pieces of kit. And that makes me also then think back, like, hey, what if Mew had used the Valentine's amp? That could be really, really cool. It leaves potential for some really interesting fights down the line. Can you imagine if, like, you had Mew, for example, switching out different amps on the fly? That would be pretty neat. So
sick.
I like this a lot for how it expanded on the way the robot fights work. It meshes with the idea of how music works and how performance works in general, and it's delivered with no exposition. It just happens, but it makes logical sense. And it invites further speculation and intrigue from the audience. It's that kind of lore detail you can get really invested in. You can think is really cool. So, I will be blunt. I did not like this episode. But that doesn't mean there weren't things I didn't like in it. And this is definitely the highlight of it for me. I really, really like this detail.
So, if you had to rate it, and you do, how would you rate it?
You know what the irony is? I've already thought of the joke that will follow the racing, but not the racing itself. How often does that happen? I don't need to really restate anything I've said.
No.
Because otherwise I'd be here for another 2 hours. And who has time for that, eh? Who has time for that? So I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm going to give this episode 2.25 penny royalties out of 5.
I'm going to give it 3.5 heart-shaped boxes out of 5.
Nice.
Definitely the weakest yet. I think it did have some merit, and hopefully it will be kind of retroactively made stronger by things that happen later in the show.
I will say this, though. I will be very, very pissed off if Nier does indeed, join in the final battle at the end and then dies.
Oh my god, that would suck.
That would be
I would not like that. I would not like that.
That would be bullshit. And that, again, would be a case of it playing too hard on the, actual history of the person in question.
That would be weird. That would be
I would not be down with that. One thing I'm going to ask in, folks, like, I've asked this a lot lately on our pods, but, like, with subjects such as this, where there is such a difference in opinion, which is good, by the way, unless it was my cooking, in which case there is no difference of opinion, you will like it, and you will eat it all. So help me God. But rather, what I mean to say is that when there is such a difference of opinion or a wide range of it, like, I'm curious to hear what you all think as well. So do hit us up at Warui Deshou. Like, if you've seen Lester's episode 4, if I'm wrong, or if you feel I'm wrong, let me know. Let me know your feelings on it. It could be because you simply don't. It could be simply because you don't care for Nirvana even as much as I do. And like I say, I rate myself on the I like him, I don't love him. scale of things. And I respect the man for his like humanity, but not being a musician really, like that, a lot of that stuff's lost on me. Maybe you feel differently. Maybe you think that he was a great musician, not a great person. Whatever like sliding scale of like quality you go on both these things. And maybe you know literally nothing on. Maybe you are like Kevin help you, one of the young ones, who has no idea who the fuck Nirvana are. And now you've listened to our podcast, you're like, well, I didn't know about them, so this episode didn't bother me. Like, tell us your thoughts, like get them out there to us, just so we can get some discussion going on this. So I would very much like to see that. I will actually this time, without like being the lazy bones I was last time, put some polls up on this, because this is going to be especially interesting to think about as we go forward, because make no mistake, we've got Prince up next. And didn't he actually have a documentary called Purple Rain?
There's a movie that is a fictional movie called Purple Rain that he starred
in. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna skip that then in that case.
It's really good though. I like his movies a lot. I like Prince quite a bit.
Prince's is just basically his own, like literally his own person, to the point where no, there's so many things I could say about the symbol, but I'm going to skip that for this fear of making something a bit tasteless. But anyway, this is where we go back to the point where my knowledge is actually much more diminished, because I know of Prince in probably the same way that Echo knows of the players in the Almanac. And you might say, by God, why have you not listened to any of his music? Good question. I wish I could answer that for you. But that's going to maybe make my opinion different next time around, whereas if I was as knowledgeable as I am about Prince as I am about Nirvana, maybe I'd feel the same. It's going to be interesting going forward with these, because we are definitely going to have a lot more like real bands. Like, it won't just stop at Prince. We may, in my opinion, get like an episode where the New Boughton sisters come back, like to twirl their mustaches again. But I feel like we're going to have a fair few more. And then, of course, we're going to have... I miss them too, actually. They came up for Spooky Toilet, which is great. That's still such a power move. I love it. But yeah, and then on top of that, we're going to have Jimmy Stone Free eventually, that's going to be interesting, because I was also I was reading about Hendrix on Wikipedia, and again, Wikipedia not the most relevant, but Hendrix actually served in the military, and then eventually got discharged because he didn't want to be a part of it. And well, the players are described as a military. Indeed, in the in the flashback we see, or whatever you want to call it, flash forward, the whole shows. There are like rows of equipment lined up in the streets of London, including a hexagonal Royal Air Force logo. So, does that play a part in it? I wonder. We'll find out.
I wonder. We'll find out maybe next week when we don our raspberry berets, go crazy, and party like it's 1999. But until then, he is Shadon, and you can find him on Twitter at Shadon1010. I am the Subtle Doctor, at the Subtle Doctor on Twitter. If you'd like to become a patron and support us financially and get some cool benefits and rewards, head on over to patreon.com/Warui Deshou, and you can read all about it. And in addition to that, or perhaps instead of that, if you want to support us, but not monetarily, and you don't want those rewards and such like, just subscribe, Apple Podcast, Spotify, write us the review, the old 5 snake on Apple Pods. It helps our discoverability. We're on Twitter, we're on Google Pods. Just search Warui Deshou and then the name of a service, and we're probably on it. So, like I said, that's going to be the end of the show. So for Shadon and the Subtle Doctor, we have been Warui Deshou, saying, embrace each other, everyone, to the ends of the universe.
Bring back the brothers!
Bring back the brothers!
I stole your line!
No!
It's mine now.